Okay, well, hello everybody. Welcome to our webinar. 2021, a year to thrive in hybrid workspace. Now we have a terrific panel for you here. We're missing one at the moment, but I'm sure he's going to turn up any moment now. He's stuck in some ante-room. We can't find him, but he's there somewhere. We have a fantastic panel, and I'd like to ask them to quickly introduce themselves first. So, Thomas, can you please introduce yourself?
Hi everyone. Yeah, so my name is Thomas Hasselman. I'm the Chief Marketing Officer at Quuppa. Quuppa is a technology company specialized in indoor positioning, and you'll be hearing more about how indoor positioning is used in the offices of today, actually, to make it healthier and safer and more enjoyable to be in. So happy to share my thoughts during this webinar.
Okay, thank you very much, Thomas. Stephan.
Thanks, Anthony. Hi everyone, my name is Stephan Schmidt. I'm a solutions manager for Symbiosy, and I sort of lead the scoping of solutions for our clients. So I sit between our technical and our commercial teams. And yeah, I think it's really exciting to be able to share some of the insights that we've gathered while we're out on the road and helping everyone understand where the workplace is heading and the information that we've been able to amass as a result.
Brilliant, and perfect timing, Kartik. I just said you got hidden in an ante-room somewhere, but we have found you. So we're just going around the panel introducing ourselves. So could you please introduce yourself?
Sure. My name is Kartik Murugan. I'm a segment manager at Intel Corporation, and my focus area is on visual solutions in smart cities and smart buildings.
Fantastic, fantastic. And I better just say who I am. I'm Anthony Slumbers. I currently co-run the Real Innovation Academy, which is a provider of online courses about real estate assets. But for 20 odd years before that, I ran various prop tech companies, always in the commercial real estate space. So we're going to start off with a poll just to get everyone sort of going here. So I'm just going to bring up a poll, which hopefully should be popping up now. So when do you think you will be making widespread use of your office again? Is that going to be within 3 months? Within 3 to 6 months? Within 6 to 9 months? Or more than 9 months from now? Okay, it's make your mind up time, 10 seconds. Okay, I'm going to close the poll and let's see what answers we got. Share results. Within 3 months, 16%, 3 to 6 months, 46%. That's pretty much what I thought, actually. Within 6 to 9, another 24. So yeah, probably not in the next 3 months, and probably, hopefully, not more than nine months away. So good, interesting. Thank you very much. Okay, so if I can start off, I'd just like to put this whole topic into context. So as we go back to the office after perhaps a year or a year and a half, we will all be asking two big questions. So firstly, we will be asking, are our offices safe? To what extent do our offices help promote the health and well-being of the people within them? What has been done to make them safe and healthy places to be? What is being done on an ongoing basis to keep them as safe and healthy places to be? And how are we going to demonstrate to our people who will be nervous about returning to the office that we take their health and well-being seriously? And secondly, we have mostly realized that we can operate as a company without an office. We have had the time to appreciate what we miss about the office and what we do not. We know what works well at home and we know what does not. Almost without exception, we all know that how we use our office, what its purpose is not going to be the same as it was in February 2020. Ask anybody who works in an office, would they like to change things about their office? And they will say yes. Many of us, perhaps most of us, would like to get back to the office, but we want to do so on better terms than before. We want to use offices for what they can do, what we can do in them better than anywhere else. And what can be done better somewhere else, we would like to carry on doing that somewhere else. So we all want a better office. We all want an office that enables us to do what we need to do as efficiently and effectively as possible. In summary of these 2 points, we all want to be happy, healthy, and productive. Now, this is where the implementation of hybrid work styles in practice comes in. How do we get what we want? So let's start with the first question, and it's all about responsibilities. It's responsibilities within a company. All of this feels like a bit like a brave new world. So where does responsibility lie? Who's asking workspace questions? Who should be asking workspace questions? And who should be answering? Who and how do we decide what should we be doing now? Stephan, would you like to start us off?
Yeah, sure. No, thank you for that. I mean, I think it's a really, really interesting field, like you're saying. So many organizations are asking these questions now. You know, why do I need to think about this, and what do I need to do? And perhaps in the past, it's been traditionally sort of heads of real estate, finance departments, facilities management departments have tried to tackle those questions. But I think with the work experience or the working experience now that many of us had over the past months or nearly a year, perhaps we're all wondering what the future might hold. And I think at the very least, everyone who would have joined today is definitely asking that question as well. So who should be asking the question? Well, I think there's some new kids on the block, if you like, in real estate. And you know, you've got your chief information officers, your IT, your HR directors, all of whom now need to work very closely together with those more traditional real estate functions like facility management and finance to make or create a new sense of belonging for their employees after the pandemic.
Excellent. Thomas? I'm not going to say the inevitable.
Here we go. Try again. Yeah, I mean, you raised those two typical questions. When is it safe to go back? And to me, the other one is that, I mean, what really motivates you to go back? Well, to me and to many of our customers, it is that collaboration, the power of collaboration, teamwork is something that you don't really fully leverage when working from home. And yeah, there are different ways how we can equip the offices to ensure the safety. I mean, something where we do is make sure that whenever there is a risk of for example, COVID now being very, very topical, that who has that person been near to. So it's that social distancing, it's the contact tracing type of features, it's that information about which spaces have been cleaned and sanitized and are safe to enter. But then equally important is that when you go back to the office, that where can I and my team or my colleagues find the kind of space we need for our work to be done. So again, technologies are there to help make it happen better than before, and yeah, we'll be exploring more of those during the discussion.
Who do you think should be asking the questions, though, of when should we go back and what should we be doing when we go back? Is this something that the real estate departments should be answering, or is it HR, or is it the main board, or is it everyone within the company should be thinking about returning to the office? That was back to you, Thomas, again.
Yeah, I think. Yeah, thanks. Yeah, I think it's very much. I mean, we were talking about people, so it comes very closely to the at least HR needs to be clearly not in the driver's seat necessarily, but have it high on the agenda, because it's all very much about ensuring that you want to do that, you want to come to the office, you don't want to feel pressured just because 4 of my other colleagues are coming to the office. I just need to do it. There needs to be somehow unwritten or written rules, but a way that it's agreed that you still, as an individual, have the right to decide. A kind of opt-in or opt-out type of model have also what comes to using the office, and
okay,
that's to me is very, very important.
Yeah, that makes sense. Does that make sense to you, Kartik? Do you think we're on the right track? Are people asking the right questions?
Yeah, I definitely think so. I think it's facility management within the company, as you say, the HR department, and also the property manager, if there is one, who should be making those decisions collaboratively. And I also think the employee should be brought into the loop at that point. They should be asked questions of how safe they feel, how productive they can be in the office versus working at home. And I think jointly the decision needs to be made.
Okay, yeah, good. Which sort of feeds into the second question is that, we then need to think about the who, the when, and the where of the new office. So who should be coming in, when they should be coming in, and where should they be working. So in particular, how do we ensure that the people who need to be in the office together actually are in the office together? And how do we ensure that they have the right workspaces available to do whatever it is they need to do? So can I start with you again on this one, Thomas?
Yeah, this is I mean, in the whole, so to say, old world, there was, of course, dedicated spaces for different departments, and what we have learned along the way now, and together working with partners like Symbiosy, is to really understand how different organizations interact with each other, and that starts to of course set the kind of dynamic boundaries between the organizations. It's not anymore that in wing A5 is where R&D sits, and a B2 is where sales is. That there are so I think it's a technology helps there, but it's a lot about also being open to sort of break the traditional boundaries between organizations and seek for the efficiency that this can actually enable.
Yeah. Okay, Kartik, do you agree with that?
Yes, I do, and I also think that employers are going to be very considerate when they try to bring back employees. So essential workers probably would be the first people in. They're probably in at this point in time already, and then they would look at the different projects that are in flight. They would look at who's critical, who needs to be in the office to increase their productivity, and those people, I think, are the ones who would be welcomed in at the beginning.
Okay. Stephan, anything in particular to add on this in terms of who should be in and how do we know?
I think Kartik hit the nail on the head at the start when he said we have to ask the employees. Yeah, I think we're entering kind of an era of choice, and there's an opportunity for us to embrace those different choices that we have in hybrid working. And we need to start asking all of our people what do they want in detail. You mentioned a couple of those words, and where, when, how, and how can we then use technology like Thomas was saying to enable those people to have access to the information to make those decisions in an effective way. I think there's a really key trend around choice that's emerging now, which has perhaps been going on for 10, 20 years with the rise of the internet and that kind of that information access, and now that's being transferred over to our physical spaces. I actually had a really interesting thought the other day that it's not just when, where, and how, and with whom, but also perhaps why in the future with the rise of the gig economy, that you'll be able to choose a work setting that's linked to a specific task that you're doing that day, and that kind of contracting environment. So a lot of choice coming our way, and I think our workplaces need to enable us to interact with that fluidity.
Yeah, excellent. Well, let's run another poll, which could be quite interesting. So this time we're going to ask, how many days a week do you think your company's employees will work from the office after the pandemic? So do we think people are going to be in not at all, 1 to 2 days, 3 to 4 days, or 5 days a week? Are we all in, all out, or a little bit of the middle? Let's give you 10 seconds again. Okay, let's see what we've got. Right, interesting again. It's a bell curve, isn't it? It's sort of what we probably could all guess it was going to be. Most things end up in a bell curve. So, you know, not many people want to never come in, and not many people want to come in all the time. Pretty much, it's like the early adopters and the early mainstream and then the late mainstream. It's a classic bell curve. That's interesting, perhaps not surprising. Okay, so we then need to go on to how do you understand how your space is being used. We've talked about choice here, and it does feel like it's a different world. We've all had choice and known about we needed to pay attention to choice for the last 20 years or so, but frankly we haven't done that much before. But how do you know your space, how your space is being used? We have people back in the office, but how do we really know in detail who is using what space? Which departments work closely with which other departments? It all feels much more complex. How do we understand how our space is really being used or not being used? So how do we find out which spaces are more valuable than others? So, because office spaces will change when we go back to the office, and hopefully will become more productive spaces. But what technologies will make the office space more productive? Kartik, would you like to start us off?
Yeah, absolutely. If you look at it, when you enter an office building, the first thing that you need to do, whether you're an employee or a visitor, is to check in. So if you can have a form factor like a kiosk, which can help the security guard with the check-in process, that would be great. So it would have body temperature detection technologies. So that is an example of some of the technologies that can be brought to bear into the office building.
Stephan, in particular, could you address this thing about understanding how people in offices and departments in offices interact? Because it feels to me like it's an area that's massively underutilized in terms of understanding that this department actually works a lot with that department, but they're too far away, and it might be better to put them together again, and all the things around that.
Yeah, no, I mean, it's a really interesting question, and it's one that we work really closely with Quuppa on as being one of our primary IoT partners at Symbiosy. I think there's two component parts that we've been realizing now throughout the pandemic. On one side, we have the digital collaboration piece. So we're thinking about how you can deliver integrations to Office 365 or G Suite and start understanding some of that data at a departmental level, not at a personal level, about how maybe teams or neighborhoods or groups of individuals in the organization interact with one another. And then we work with Quuppa to bring in the physical side of that. So what, for example, my email traffic or my booked calendar meetings can't tell me is when I've run into Anthony or Thomas or Kartik in the hallway, and we've perhaps spoken about an interesting video we saw or an interesting article we read, and that might have germinated some kind of ideas or innovation. So what we're really working on with Quuppa is using their indoor positioning technology to actually understand those water cooler moments, to understand how people organically collaborate in the office. And that for us is a big part of the office's wider story as well, because the new workplace, the new hybrid workplace, has to be an arena for socializing, collaborating, innovating, and understanding how people do that now is really critical in developing a space that's going to promote it in the future.
Interesting. Thomas?
Yeah, no, my personal life is my wife is responsible for the campus environment in one of the universities in Finland, and really about the layouts and how to energize the students and all that, and they could do a lot with such information that Symbiosy is offering to its real estate and employer companies to really understand why are certain spaces never be used and why are certain spaces on a kind of heat map always showing red. There must be something that they can replicate, and learnings from areas that are kind of cold, never used. So there is a lot that comes to just looking at the behavior of the human mass moving around, and of course, if you know that certain type of people, again, no need to go to an individual level, but if you know that these are the HR people, this is the R&D, sales, and you can start drawing pretty interesting conclusions on how to improve your surrounding.
And do you find that when you have an office space that you've installed all this on, that does it end up that the office turns out to be working like people thought it was, or do most people go, oh, actually I never realized that I never realized that no one ever used that space, or I never realized that all these people got together? I'm sort of intrigued about how much real insight we can generate, because I have a feeling that we do a lot of work in the real estate industry on hunch and gut feeling, and we think we know what's happening, but it always feels interesting when we have a lot more data to actually work with.
Yeah, I mean, I will let Stephan fill in, but for sure it gives insights that we never had before, and it also triggers use cases that we never thought we would do. I mean, we have some of our corporate customers who use this technology for the fun part of it. So Easter egg hunts, find Santa Claus in the office type of games. So there's a gamifying factor to all those more serious stuff like safety and efficiency that shouldn't be neglected, and you can offer the employees personal services about related to their activity level in the office, how it changes and how much they've been walking. I mean, there's a lot of things you can even incentivize them to make sure that you have a healthy employee base, that employer base based on how mobile they are. So plenty of stuff in addition to these traditional needs that you would imagine that the location provides.
Yeah, interesting. So, Stephan, would you like to jump in here? And particularly, I heard you talk recently about the difference between how people are interacting when they've been away from the office as opposed to how they interacted when they were in the office.
Yes, spot on. I was about to bring that example in because I think it's been a really interesting finding that's coming out of our database. Some of our existing clients, we've been working with them throughout the pandemic, and as they've transitioned to that work from home environment, which isn't really hybrid, but is more sort of explicitly remote, we've been able to help them understand how that's impacted upon their kind of collaboration in their organization. So we had the data before that was coming out of the Quuppa system, which we've spoken about. We could see those interactions, and that was overlaid as well with presence in meeting rooms and the Office 365 stuff. Now we're comparing that physical side with the digital side. So how does the departmental interaction compare when we're just on Teams or we're just on Gmail? And actually what's been really interesting is that the kind of project-based interactions, people who are in the same team, they work together on a daily basis, or they work together on a project, those interactions have not fallen off at all. And I think a lot of the surveys that we're seeing coming out of the wider community, I know there was a BCG one that I saw recently, were stating that people felt they were more productive at home. They perhaps had more time to focus on what was important, and they could get tasks done. But what the kind of the side of the coin that we're not seeing is that those organic interactions, those water cooler moments, which I mentioned earlier, have completely fallen off the map. You know, you don't see people booking a 5-minute call with someone to tell them about something, especially not someone who you perhaps haven't seen in a while. And like you know, Thomas mentioned the university departments there a moment ago. I think it's really interesting that university departments, they design their campuses to be sort of polarizing, if you like. So you have one department next to another, which is very different. You might have biology next to finance, or you might have philosophy next to engineering. And the intention behind that is to get people from different kind of backgrounds talking to each other to create those ideas. And when we are now working from home and we're just talking to people who are in our department, in our team, in our project, we kind of have maybe there's a risk that we fall into a certain way of thinking and kind of put our visors on and lose out on some of those new ideas and new innovations that do occur through the organic collaboration in the office.
Yeah, I personally think we actually need to do a lot more of the what Steve Jobs used to call about engineered serendipity, and Thomas mentioned about gamifying the workplace. But you know, all this talk, everyone, we hear so much about water cooler moments, but frankly, how many people have ever had anything really interesting turn up at a water cooler? It's actually very rare, but we have had really interesting things happen with other people in different areas. And I think particularly as we become more hybrid, and I realized earlier that I didn't actually put the results up of the number of days. So just to quickly flip back on that, we actually only had 4% of people expected 0 days, 40% thought 1 to 2, 49% 3 to 4, and 7% said 5 days a week. So it's absolutely clear that we're going to be working in the office and out of the office. And I think we're going to have to, as managers, become much more deliberative in how we make sure all layers and all networks get combined. And you can't really do that without the sort of data that we're discussing here. You really need to understand what has fallen away and what is doing fine and where you need to concentrate. So it's this really interesting dynamic building up, I think, between needing a lot of human thought to be put into making the workplace great, and then lots of really great technology with really good data, because you need the two to work together. So let's
make a quick point about meeting rooms. So I absolutely agree with Stephan. There are going to be some people who are going to be remotely working, maybe from home or from another city. There may be other people in the office. So there are definitely technologies that help with that collaboration piece. So previously, many meetings were face-to-face. They may have been a whiteboard inside the room. People would meet, they would discuss, jot down notes on the board, and probably take a photograph and share it with the rest of the meeting participants. But with new technologies, video conferencing, for example, collaboration technologies, it's now possible to see everybody on the screen. There's also this form factor called the interactive whiteboard, where the whiteboard is no longer a static whiteboard, but it's digital. And people can jot down notes from their computer onto that interactive whiteboard, and all those meeting notes are captured digitally. So nobody needs to take a photograph, and you can also enable a number of analytics on it. So cameras within the room, cameras on your computer can detect how actively you participated, whether the meeting was productive. So all those metrics could also be recorded. So there's definite transformation of the meeting room.
Interesting. So let's sort of dive down a bit more into the practicalities of this in terms of what technology do we need to understand all that we need to understand, and can this be retrofitted into the office, or is this only something that you can have in a brand new office? And how long does it take, and how long before we have information that we can actually act on? So what technologies do we need, and what's the practical implications of getting started with all this? And I think, Stephan, you should probably start us off on this one.
Sure, yeah. So I think it's probably most useful for me to speak about Symbiosy specifically and what we do. We have a Steps to Smart framework, or a Steps to Smart Workplace framework, and that's very much focused on that retrofitability aspect. So we're aware of the fact that we're dealing with large organizations. Those organizations have got a multitude of real estate assets. Some of those might be owned, others are leased. They have different varying levels of size, varying levels of investment behind them that client is willing to commit. So what we really wanted to start with is creating a uniform experience that sits on top of it. So the first step to Smart is our app, which is a workplace scheduling tool. What that effectively allows you to do is to understand where there are spaces to work, what those spaces are like, and whom you'll be able to work with in that building or in that area. So you have that uniform kind of first layer, which has no interaction, it's purely software based, that sits above it all. And then what you can do beneath that is start layering on different levels of IoT, you start layering on building integrations, and really start adding additional granularity as well off the back of that. So always the same user experience, the same kind of single front end. So if, say, you've got an employee in Japan, they travel over to America or to France, they're still going to be using the same app. They still can look at spaces and identify where their colleagues are in the same way. But you might have, say, a wholly owned office building in Japan where you have, I don't know, 20 stories, you own it, you operate it, and you want to invest in those building integrations, the IoT, whereas your French office is maybe a sales hub, 30 people, you lease it short term, and you don't think you want to implement that kind of next level granularity, because the value just isn't there. So it's a really fluid kind of framework. And I guess really quickly to close on the timing. So the kind of software piece with the app takes about 2 weeks to implement. So it's really quite quick. And then the IoT, I would say between a month to 6 weeks, depending on the readiness of the building and perhaps also the location. So I think in Europe, Middle East, we can be a lot quicker than perhaps we could be somewhere in South America.
Okay, Thomas, would you like to expand on that and maybe explain a bit more particularly about what's good about your product, why it has a particular edge?
Sure. Yeah. First of all, the greenfield brownfield discussion. So we are happy to see that something that started in the healthcare space already some years ago was that whenever new hospitals being built, one of the basic requirements was location. So that's of course a great win that you get into the requirement specifications already before even the first brick has been brought to site. Now we're seeing the same thing happening also in new office buildings, high risers, new big headquarters being built, especially in Europe and the Middle East, that they do come with that requirement. And it comes, of course, with the agenda that we can ensure safety, we can have security of the building, in case of evacuations and stuff like that. That really works in our way. You could say that there is a need for location information. Why Quuppa? Well, we do track all kinds of assets which are transmitting Bluetooth, the radio signals, and others as well. But Bluetooth especially, as that encompasses more than just the tracking of small devices. That might be the card, the ID card that you're wearing, or the badge that you open the door with. But it's also smartphones. So there are many use cases where you navigate throughout the buildings, especially if you're visiting a building or trying to find a colleague, that you do with your smartphone. So having it as a natively supported feature of your phone, that's what Quuppa does. And then it's also, as it's Bluetooth, it's a de facto radio for all kinds of IoT devices. So not only do we know where the devices are, but we can also act as a gateway for collecting that information. So you kind of get that one platform and multiple use cases all in one. And I think that's where we differentiate for many alternative technologies. We've seen that especially now with COVID that came about in the early phase of COVID, that everybody wanted social distancing, making sure that you wear a tag and it starts to buzzer if you're too close to a colleague of yours. Fine, that's a single use case. But if you can combine that with knowing, okay, I've been in these rooms, so you get the contact tracing function or feature included in that same tag that you have, and you might even get the information then that which areas are safe to enter. So you have the kind of the cleaning staff data also being tracked. So it again, that one platform, multiple use cases seems to resonate, especially in office environments where there's so many different needs by so many different stakeholders.
And presumably it has a strong degree of future-proofing in the sense that we seem to be building, what we're thinking about how to use these technologies now is probably quite primitive to how we will think about them in 2 years' time. But essentially, if you've got this foundation in, then you can layer extra layers of data on top of everything. So you build up a richer and richer understanding. Yeah, interesting.
Exactly.
Kartik, would you like to say anything about the practicalities of where we can use these technologies? And
absolutely, yeah. From an Intel perspective, we can definitely enable that intelligent edge platform for a building. So we're talking about one platform that can host multiple building applications, and by using that architecture, you're making it much more scalable. So let's say 2 months from now you want to enable a new use case. you have to bring in more applications. It's very easy to drop in those applications onto that single edge platform. Also, it is possible to employ all your hardware and software-based security onto that one edge platform. So previously, building owners, building managers used to employ multiple point solutions. So what we're saying is consolidate all of that, use virtualization technologies. It saves on cost as well. The total cost is reduced because of that. And then reliability is the other important factor. So if you have point solutions with proprietary hardware, and if for some reason the hardware fails, then you have to go back to the vendor to get a replacement, and that may take time. Whereas with this consolidated architecture, what happens is if the underlying hardware fails, you can very quickly transfer those workloads or software workloads onto another edge server. So, I think from that perspective, it can be easily retrofitted into a brownfield environment, and as you said, the scalability is also very important. From a practical point of view, I want to just give you a few examples. So, for example, in the office premises, you can easily fit in digital signages. We're talking about screens. This would, provide you with, safety and wellness messages, employee communications. It could also double up as, service alerts, right? So, you need to evacuate the building, so those signages can be transformed immediately to publish messages, go in this particular direction towards exit or something like that. So there's a variety of new use cases that can be enabled. I also want to touch upon, the kiosk that I brought up initially. You can place it in the lobby, but you can also place it in other places. The most important capability that I think we can enable is wayfinding. As we realize now, the workspace is going to be very it's going to be configured dynamically based on the requirements of the employer and the employee. So it's going to change as time passes. And for somebody who's coming into the office maybe 1 or 2 days a week, or for even a visitor who's coming into the building, they need to find a meeting room or they need to go and meet somebody, they need to be able to find their way. And I think that capability can be easily integrated. It's just a software that's going to sit on a form factor like a kiosk or a signage.
Yeah, and because you're bringing all these and you're consolidating lots of different systems in a non-proprietary way, but you are pulling them all together, does that enable you to deal with data security and privacy and respecting people's information better than being in lots of different systems?
Yeah, that's my point. So if you had multiple point solutions and you had to secure each one of those point solutions separately, that would be a greater effort, and it may not be very effective because you're bringing many things together. By using this consolidated architecture, the underlying hardware platform is common, and you can focus all your software and hardware-based security capabilities onto that single platform, and you're going to get a much better return on investment. Absolutely.
But you're still retaining the flexibility to swap in and out the different systems. Yeah, excellent, good. Okay, well, I think we're going to move on to a third poll here. I just wanted to say if anyone has any questions, which we're going to deal with in a Q&A at the end of this, please just add them into the chat section, which you should see on your right probably. So add your questions away. So we're going to now ask a third poll, which hopefully I will get completely right this time. So I'm going to launch the poll. So how much space per person do you think will be allocated after the pandemic? So will we use much less than before? So at least 30% less space? Less than before, somewhere between 1 and 30%? Will we use about the same amount of space as before? Will we use more than before, so 1 to 30% more than we had before? Or will we use much more space than before? Interesting. Okay, 10 seconds, please. Okay, I'm going to close the poll, and this time I'm going to share the results rather than keep them to myself. So that's, well, actually that's quite a big number. 16% think we're going to use much less space than before, and 29% less than before. Still, 33% still a fair amount that think we're going to use the same as before, and interesting, more 15 think we use more, and then 7% will be using much more. It'd be so interesting to delve into the details of why people think we're going to use much more or much less. I mean, there's obviously this thing about dedensifying the workplace and each person having more space. But you know, according to the poll earlier, we're only going to be coming in 2 or 3 days a week, so there's a big drop in usage, and you wonder to what extent dedensifying will compensate for that. But interesting. Okay, so we're going to hide the results from that and move on to the next question. So finally, we're really talking here about a workplace that talks back to us. It is an intelligent, you know, the term I hate about smart workplaces and smart buildings is really a case of, does this building actually talk back to us? Does it give us information? Does it provide us with detailed data we need to enable our people to be happy, healthy, and productive? But how do we make use of all this data? I can just see these reams of terabytes of data piling on top of us. So how do we use this data? What skills are needed? And is this something we can do ourselves, or do we have to outsource it and get someone else to do it? And how do we analyze the data so it really allows us to optimize our space based on the reality? So is there a formula? Is there a set of procedures to follow? Because it's all very well collecting all this data, but it feels to me that we need to develop new skills and new ways of thinking in terms of how we analyze this data, and then how we actually make use of this data in making better workplaces. So Thomas, would you like to start us off on the realities of how do we make this stuff really work?
Yeah, no, I mean, it's I think something that's obvious that we're seeing from the cases we are working on with our partners is that we don't so much talk about the energy efficiency. I mean, the traditional intelligent building or type of KPIs and how to become a green office and all that. It's more the human centricity, the user centricity related improvements, and that of course comes with a totally different set of skills that you need to have in order to really understand that how can we make this an enjoyable place so that less people are signing off being sick or instead deciding to work from home. Or I mean, it should be the ones who are using the office on a daily basis that should really be driving very much the development around within the office.
Yeah. Stephan, would you like to delve into this? How do we actually make this data actionable?
I think there's kind of 2 component parts to this for me. The first is the actionability of the data in a live environment. Kartik mentioned a couple of use cases with sort of digital signage, wayfinding. I spoke a little bit about having access to information via a single app. A lot of the data is live, and it supports a lot of the tools and experiences that we create in the building itself. So you might, for example, have a booking platform for desks and social distancing with the additional IoT layered on, like that what Quuppa can provide. You then have a verification of whether or not that person has actually shown up to that desk. You might be able to incorporate data from cleaners to understand whether the desk has been cleaned, and then you can free it back up with the within the software layer that the end users have in front of them. So there's kind of that feedback loop, that instantaneous feedback loop on one side, which gets enabled. The second part is how we analyze the data historically and use it to make strategic decisions, more sort of medium to long term. I think there's, you know, you mentioned there's probably new skill sets that are required. I think something that I mentioned at the start was this kind of convergence of HR, IT, real estate, FM. And we're seeing some organizations come up with a new job role, which is the workplace experience lead or or workplace experience designer. And I think that's something actually that the workplace consultancies have taken care of for a long time, and is now being brought increasingly in-house specifically for that reason, to deal with that data which might be seen as or felt as being sensitive, and provide kind of a checking process or verification process against what's coming in from the outside. So there's definitely new skill sets required, and then I guess on top of that, the usage of new tools that are able to make sense of it. So terabytes of data coming out of Quuppa or centralized Intel IoT platform, you're not going to want to try and use Excel to be analyzing that. I've regularly broken the more than a million row limit on Excel sheets, so I know that it's not possible. And Power BI, Tableau, Click, lots of these great new tools that are coming out, and perhaps you can leverage externally as well. We, for example, at Symbiosy have a set of dashboards and reports that we provide to our clients. You're very welcome to use them. We help or work with you to customize them to make them as useful as possible. For example, if you're interested in how much you can reduce your real estate portfolio by, or whether or not your collaboration spaces are designed effectively, we can design our analytics to help you answer those questions. And equally, we can just provide you with sort of a single structured API so that your own teams, like that workplace experience team, can make use of the data to drive those analytics yourself.
So in practice, if my company was suddenly using this and I had 1,000 people in and out of my office all the day, is there a sort of like a baby steps way of starting this? Sort of like an easy introduction, ask these 5 questions, and then once I've got used to, it can tell me these 5 questions, now ask 5 more advanced questions. Is it something that I'm feeling this is a skill that and a capability that companies need to develop within themselves, rather than I can see how you could just outsource it and say, well, someone analyze this data for me. But it feels more like we need to learn how to really use this. So when you're starting someone off, do you sort of start them with right, these are the things, these are the questions, and these are the answers, and then we move on, and you sort of take people through a slowly richer and richer understanding of how they are using their space?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I think that's very much my job role, really, is to carry out that scoping process. Actually, one of my favorite quotes by Cedric Price, his famous architect, is technology is the answer, but what was the question? And I think people like to forget that technology is an enabler. It's an enabler for everything. It's not the end goal. So it's really important that the organization takes kind of a design thinking approach at the start and ask themselves questions that they're trying to answer, and they will be different for every organization because of the different cultures, mentalities, the kind of the macroeconomic environments that they find themselves in. So I would say there's a set of general questions maybe that a lot of organizations are asking themselves now. How much space do I need? How do I maintain my company culture? How do I allow my people to collaborate effectively, be healthy, happy with this new kind of way of working? But each organization is going to have very unique questions, and some are more specific than others. I can cite an example. We were talking to a large telecommunications company, which we'll all know, but I won't mention. And their head of real estate was saying that the biggest problem that he has is convincing department heads that they don't need more desks. Because you mentioned there earlier that when I walk through an office building, does the data just tell me what I already know? And perhaps sometimes it does, but that's still what people need. They want that ammo, which is actual rounds rather than blanks, to be able to drive forward their kind of organizational agenda. So his example was he would walk past a bank of desks, there'd be no one there. The head of or that department head would say, I need more desks. If he actually had data on whether that department was using a certain amount of desks, then he could hold that in front of them and say, well, actually, no, I have tangible evidence that you don't need more desks, and that we can perhaps even reduce that colleague to desk ratio further or increase it.
I think this is a really important point, that we're not just collecting data just for fun, and we're not just analyzing it just for fun. We're doing this in order to be able to optimize our workplaces to be better places for our people to be. I mean, going back to the central premise, as I said, of what's the point of an office? How do you make an office successful? Well, you make people happy, you make them healthy, and you make them productive. and you sort of need to do all three. And I think the way it's developing, that as we start to understand what you can understand about a space, then there's going to be more and more opportunities to reconfigure and optimize and continually iterate on a space to make it more productive, which sort of gets us on quite nicely to actually what is the last question. And this is, should we be thinking about redesigning all of our space? So are we thinking, oh, well, this, in this new world, and people are going to be coming in a couple of days a week, and we're going to have all this data, and we're going to understand how departments work together. Should we be thinking about redesigning all the space, or how do we make space that is more flexible? And then how do we actually go about continually adjusting spaces based on the data? So, Carter, this might be one for you. That sort of, how can property managers use this technology to actually improve the effectiveness and the efficiency of building operations?
Yeah, definitely. I'll give you a use case example. So, many of us, we've scheduled meetings, we've booked conference rooms, but for one reason or another, the meeting does not take place. And then we forget to cancel the reservation on that room. So for somebody who's looking for a room, that room appears reserved, they're not able to use it. And so that's a reduction in productivity. But what if you could have, let's say, an occupancy sensor within the room, and it can publish that information on, let's say, a message bus on that common architecture that I was talking about, which says, okay, the meeting was at 2 o'clock, at 2:05, I see nobody in the room. And that message can then be read by, let's say, a building management application, which is also sitting on that edge platform. And it's able to understand the context. There was a meeting, but the meeting room has been reserved, but nobody's in the meeting room. So using analytics, using AI, it can trigger the meeting room scheduler to release that room. And so somebody who's looking for a room at that point in time at 2:05, they now see that a room has become available. So that's an example where you increase productivity based on real-time data. The other example I would give is, I've talked about those signages displaying messages, employee communication, safety messages, wellness messages. We could definitely put in technology into that signage, which does anonymous audience analytics. So what it looks at is, who is standing in front of the screen and who is looking at it, the age, the gender, so the demographic information, the dwell times, how long is that person looking at it, case detection. So what part of the screen interests that person more than the others. So using that information, we can determine how effective was that communication, how effective was that message. And if something's not effective, then it's a waste of time and space to put that message on that screen, and you can customize it or you can modify it so that it does become effective for somebody. The third example I would give, and again, this is from a building perspective, is, let's take HVACs, the air conditioners within the building. Typically what happens is you have regular maintenance, maybe every few months. But what if, all the data that's being generated from all the sensors in the building, if we could look at, let's say, the air handler within the air condition, and it's operating in a non-optimum way, it's not using algorithms and analytics, you're able to figure out that, this may fail at some point in the near future. So using that data, you can then ask the maintenance crew to set up an operation to take a look at it, and by doing that, you help, you're avoiding a potential failure of the air conditioner, and thus a reduction in productivity of the employees inside that building. So those are a few examples of where real-time data can be used to help increase.
I particularly liked your second example of understanding where people look on a screen, because I've long had this idea of we should be trying to treat our office spaces more like websites. Because if we're running a website, anyone who runs a website knows that you pay huge amounts of attention to who
Yes.
looked at that and who looked at that and who looked at that and who looked at that. And in terms of understanding, really understanding how people are using spaces and how you're conveying information and how they're using information, I thought that was an excellent example. Gentlemen, we have one poll after this, so it's pretty much last comments before we go to a poll and then open up questions. So Thomas, would you like to sign us off with something?
Yeah, I think Kartik talked about gathering sensor data, thousands of gigabytes, and that can be used to then improve the efficiency and the well-being of whoever needs to use that data. But I think something we should never forget is that the best sensor, the most advanced sensor of them all, is the human being. And that's something that some of our partners are leveraging, so that they make it extremely easy to give feedback when you are out and about in and about in the office, and you see something that isn't really to your liking, or that it is to your liking, that you can provide that immediate feedback to the facility management, that okay, this area is too cold, or this space here needs cleaning, or this is always crowded, or whatever that is. And simply by opting in to allow that time and location stamp to be added, there is a pretty quick way to provide sensor data that helps improve the happiness of the ones in the office. So just again, something that sometimes we don't need to be very technical. It's very about the human behavior.
Yeah, excellent. I like the human side, but Stephan, we've got a question here which is a little bit more geeky. When do you think that 3D holograms will be involved in our day-to-day business lives in the post-pandemic hybrid workplace? Are we being human, or are we being Terminators?
yeah, absolutely. Yeah, I mean, it's such an interesting field, isn't it? I mean, what actually comes into that as well, there's been such amazing improvements in brain-machine interfaces and brain-computer interfaces recently. You know, how do we start interacting with those kinds of environments without using a mouse or any kind of mechanical input, but rather just with our minds? And I mean, Kartik mentioned there briefly the kind of the virtual collaborative whiteboard. You can imagine an environment where that takes on a more dynamic sort of three-dimensional scape. People have that equipment at home, and yeah, I mean, when Melinda Gates says that anyone who tries to predict the future more than 20 years ahead is lying, I'm probably not capable of predicting exactly when it will happen, but what I will say is that it's likely to be sooner than people think.
Excellent. Well, let's launch the last poll, because we started a couple of minutes late, so I'm just running over slightly. So here's our last poll. So, what technology do you expect to implement to support your office move in 2021? Workplace scheduling apps, occupancy sensing, air quality monitoring, touchless access, or none of the above? Right, 10 seconds to go. Okay, here we go. Right, I'm now going to share the results. I'm quite intrigued by the 18% of none of the above. I must say, actually. I'm wondering if people are being entirely serious there. You've got to do something. So what's actually, it's workplace scheduling apps, occupancy, air quality monitoring. Yeah, I agree. They're probably the big three. Touchless access, said 10%. There was a time earlier in the pandemic when it seemed that touching things surfaces were going to be more important than actually it turned out to be. So I'm not surprised that has come down a bit. So yes, there's clearly a lot going on, apart from the 18% who don't think anything's going to happen. But anyway, so I'm just going to hide the results there. closing comments, gentlemen. What would you like to leave our audience with? Very quickly, because we're just a minute or two over. Thomas? Quick closing comments, sorry.
No, I think yeah.
Your human point actually was.
Yeah, I think I used it already. So yeah, human in the center of making it very attractive to come back to the offices and when needed. So I think let's build it around that one. Build it around the human.
Yeah. Kartik?
Yeah, I definitely think that post pandemic, the needs of the workplace are going to alter significantly. And I think we should all be helping to use that technology as a means to an end. If it's going to accelerate something, then so be it. So I think definitely we're in the path to seeing a much different workplace going forward.
Excellent. And Stephan? It really is the final word to you.
Yeah, I think the big thing is choice. Like I said, we need to avoid becoming despots as employers and telling people to either work entirely from home or entirely in the office or something in between. People want choice, and that's going to be a differentiator for attracting talent moving forward as well. So a work from anywhere mentality is gonna have to have that choice attached to it, and people need to be equipped with the right tools and applications and data sets to enable that.
Yeah, I think that's a very, very good point to end on. Got to take advantage of what technology you've got to have. Got to be human, and got to give people choices. So fantastic. Thank you very much, gentlemen. Thank you to our audience. I hope you enjoyed it, and see you next time.